With Microsoft for 15 years, so a long time. I've worked in operations, finance, HR, legal, regional roles, and ended up in sales the last 6 years. Based out of Dublin, but spend maybe 6-7 weeks a year in Wexford, in the sunny southeast, for holidays with my family and my wife. So I do know the region quite well, and I've definitely contributed to the upkeep in the summer down there.
Hi everyone, my name is Declan McGill. I work with Unum, who are based in Carlow. They are a US-based insurance company specialising in disability and life insurance. They've been in Carlow for just over 10 years. I joined them just over 10 years ago as well. So there are about 130 people there now. When I joined there was around 20 people, so I've seen significant growth there over the past 10 years. I'm a director of IT delivery there. So the vast majority of staff there are application development, developing and enhancing applications for our US-based operations. So as I said, I've been there 10 years. Prior to that, I was an application developer myself, working in Dublin in Royal Bank of Scotland, and I took the decision about 10 years ago to leave the big smoke and migrate back down to the southeast.
Hi, my name is John O'Connor, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Kollect. Kollect is a booking engine for waste collection. So what we do is we make it simple for people to get any waste collected. So whether it's a bin, a skip, Christmas lights to garden sheds, you can go on our platform and we'll outsource collection. We're currently operating nationally. We're about to go into UK. We have 30 employees. My background is I'm in the waste industry 10 years, and I've been involved in 6 previous startups with different degrees of success. Mainly they're in Dublin, but I've been living in Waterford for the last 10 years. And I'd like to thank everyone for John for asking us to talk here today.
Hi, my name is Michael Gannon. I've spent the last 20 years in sales, primarily in Dublin, working for companies like Diageo and Mars. I suppose from my perspective, I'm currently moving back down to the southeast. I live in Kilkenny and moving my work down here as well. But I suppose as much as this is about what tech companies want, my kind of view on this and what I want to try and get out of this is how do we attract people down here to have careers, because it's very difficult to get the top talent down from places like Dublin. How do we create the hubs here where people want to come down and live and work and have very successful and long careers in the southeast? So thank you, John.
Okay, and my name is Joy Redmond and I'm the host today. I'm also head of research of Sonru, which is an asynchronous video interviewing platform, and my role there is to create the body of knowledge and credibility and authority around technology that didn't exist before, so to normalise it by creating that body of knowledge. So for a stage in the recruitment process that didn't exist for previous generations. So that's sort of, I've always worked in the startup area in marketing, but not as much in the product marketing mix, but more in product and in educational piece. So where do we start? Well, I thought maybe one way to look at how to attract companies to the southeast region, the tech companies, is to piggyback on what industries or sectors that are currently successful here. What sectors that are pretty hot in the southeast are capable of digitisation? I might start with you, Declan.
Thanks, Joy. So I'm obviously gonna lean towards the insurance industry. Surprise, surprise. But the insurtech sector is a rapidly growing sector. There's lots of opportunities in the space. Lots of traditional insurance companies have not really fully embraced digitization. So there's lots of opportunities in all aspects, sales through enrollment, onboarding, policy administration, claims management. So I know certainly in Unum we had a new CIO that joined last year, and he's embarked on a digitization program because he sees the opportunities in the marketplace. So we're trying to tap into that growth in Unum Ireland, and he wants us to grow and basically double our numbers. So I think there's great opportunities in the insurtech sector.
Did you say you had some sort of centre idea around that?
So yes. So recently, and this is exciting for the Southeast, Carlow IT have received funding for setting up an InsurTech Innovation Centre based out of Carlow IT. So they will partner with startups to try to accelerate InsurTech initiatives. They will also partner with industries, companies like Unum and others in the region to foster strategic partnerships, learning, graduate programs, all of that. So it's an exciting, it's just literally been announced in the past month, but the InsurTech Network Centre watch this space because I think it's going to be a big opportunity to expand the InsurTech presence in the Southeast.
Plenty of spin-offs out of it and stuff.
Hopefully, yeah.
Peter, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, listen, I mean, it's a very exciting time to be involved in technology in Ireland. Obviously, working for Microsoft, I touch all sectors in the community. But as I see Glambia on the badges here today, you know, a lot of Irish companies are doing great work in the agri sector. You know, I pick a company like Keypack that are, you know, based all around the country. You know, very family-orientated business founded in the 1800s. Have had huge expansion in the last 10 years and, you know, came to us looking for solutions on how they can digitize. You know, so we've had great discussions with them over the last year, you know, talking about how to use collaboration tools to communicate between their different sites, you know, how they update their billing systems and ordering systems. And they're on a journey at the moment of, you know, improving their operations, increasing efficiencies. But the best part about it is, you know, from a Microsoft perspective, we're using a lot of Indigenous Irish partners to do the implementation and have these discussions with the companies. So we have a huge partner network around the country, and some of the strongest partners we have are down here in the Southeast, and I'll probably talk about a couple of them later. So we see great opportunity in most sectors. You know, digital transformation is a word that's being used loosely at the moment, but we see a lot of customers are moving from on-premise solution to cloud, and it really improves their efficiencies. So it's a great time to be involved in the sector.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, looking at it from an agricultural perspective as well, data and the digitalization of data is becoming critically more important. If you look at the work they've done in America in the NOAA, which is part of the Department of Commerce, they basically have all these weather stations around the US. They're creating much better predictability around how the weather is going to perform, and more importantly, they're bringing that to farmers to allow them to predict best time to sow, best time to spray chemicals, best time to harvest, etc., etc. As the weather changes and the weather dictates when you should do these things best. Also taking into account then the quality of land, the types of land, our ability, etc., to the satellites that they're using as well. So it's bringing all these data sources together to try and paint that picture. There's a model something like that happening through the TSSG here actually in WIT as well, with the likes of Lumbia, the likes of Dairy Gold, the likes of Tagus and Met Éireann working together to try and build that kind of model for the farming environment here. That's predominantly aimed at the production of milk, but you could roll that out to production pretty much anything. And it's the trick then once they figure out how you get that done, how we get the predictability model working, is how then do you bring that to the farmer to allow him or her to actually make use of the systems as well. So there's a lot of this kind of stuff already going on, but for me data is the big swing here in terms of how we digitalise that and you use it and manipulate it going forward.
Okay, do we see any potential to develop clusters around current success stories? Like I suppose, who was the Kilkenny man? Yourself, was it? And like say Cartoon Saloon are a huge success story in animation. Are there other towns that have a big success story that a cluster could develop around it? Anyone any ideas?
Yeah, I suppose here in Waterford, like you have Nearform and you've other companies that have done well, and like they really promoted like Tremor even, like as being a destination for attracting tech, and they've done it successfully. I think it's really up to the company to create the culture. For us as a startup at a micro level, we have a good online presence and we work hard in this, and we let our staff sort of what we're about attract people to the southeast. We're up in Dublin a good bit. Recently we took 4 or 5 people who moved from Dublin down to our company. And it was based on our culture. Like our culture, we bring them down, we ask them what they want, the buzz of being involved in a startup as well. You need to get that across. Like we've 30 employees. Like we're really pitching to people to be the first 100s. You know, and that energy that's around startups, which really comes from the founders, can be, you know, obviously working in big organizations has its benefits, but like you can really make a difference in the smaller companies. Also, like the ecosystem here in Waterford, there's a lot of events, even this event going on now. That creates energy. Like I feel like I was involved in Cork a few years ago, and that sort of culture or excitement seems to be happening here in Waterford. And it's attractive. So when you're talking to people up in Dublin, they're like, yeah, there's something happening down there. So
I think in the last 5 years, the whole startup has become very hot. And, you know, like I've always worked in startups, where it's always like, oh, here she goes again. You know what I mean? Whereas now there is this whole ecosystem and startup weekends and meet-up groups and that whole buzz that is, and it's getting sponsored at corporate level by the likes of Bank of Ireland or whatever, or, you know, county councils and stuff.
Yeah, I think it's really good. Like, and it does. And you got to know as well your market nearly. Like, I'm not really going after 20-year-olds or recent graduates, because I think they need to go out there and go to London, go to Dublin. It's really people with families, or people are looking for good quality. They've gone out there. Like you can have this sort of image. Like for certain people, look, the bigger organisations suit as brilliant opportunities, and certain people that'll attract, and other people who go out there and they realise, you know, the work-life balance is as important.
I think there's two parts to that equation. There's the employees, but how do we lure the companies down? Anyone any ideas on that?
Well, I think one of the things that's been a real success for Unum is their partnership with IT Carlow. Over a third of our current employee, a count of 130, came through, graduated from IT Carlow. We've got a really close bond with them. We help influence the course content. And just recently, our CTO was across from the US. He visited the campus. He was really impressed with what he saw. And in particular, just getting back to data, he joined part of the he joined the lecture theatre for the Masters in Data Science, and what he saw there prompted him to invest in a new data analytics hub within Unum. So I think the fostering close relationships with our third level institutions, continuing to foster those relationships, you know, internship programs, helping to shape the content of the courses themselves so that the graduates come out ready for work is really important.
I think going back to the clusters and linking it into your point as well, if you look at some of the food trends again that are coming down the road, a lot of these are expected to come from smaller startup companies. So the big food trends in terms of the actual innovation. So you'll see some of the bigger ones coming through, like you know, making meat substitutes from dairy products, which sounds quite random and quite out there. That came from a relatively large organisation, but there are plenty of other examples of smaller trends that are being started by startup companies. And if we can link back, you know, getting the proper food scientists set up and trained in the local ITs and universities, and then having somewhere for them to go to either start their own businesses or to work with emerging businesses as well. I think that's critically important, because it can't all be down to a Columbia or a Kerry to develop all the food innovation that's going to happen in this country. And because we are kind of unique in terms of how we feed our animals, Ireland and probably only New Zealand are the only two countries that are similar in how we work. It is down to us to try and make those changes happen. Like one of the key trends that is happening globally is, for example, in the US, there's one less meat meal consumed every week than there was 5 years ago. So the move away from meat, from a sustainability, emissions, etc. point of view, is actually happening and will happen over here as well. So how do we start now to plan for that in the future, and how do we embed a culture of innovation to try and drive those changes through both our people and our infrastructures?
Yeah, and just to add to that, and I mean, it's a great point in relation to education and the graduate programs and the intern programs, and we have that heavily invested in as well. But just 2 points in relation to the startups. I mean, one of the biggest partners we have, and most successful partners we have in Microsoft, is based out of Gorey, which is Innovate. You know, and Jim and Annette are doing great work there. And I mean, and they really buy into our ethos of moving customers, you know, solving business solutions or problems, giving them business solutions in the cloud. So they're doing great work across the country, you know, north and south, and it's great to see. And we need to find another couple of those in the region. I think what we see from our perspective in relation to startups, and we call them ISVs, it's just a label we call them, is that this is where the next step is. And this is, even from a Microsoft perspective, is our traditional customers are now going to become these startups that come with these new ideas, new innovations, to supplement the bigger organizations. And there's plenty of them in the Southeast. And I think this is a great event to mobilize it. But, what's the next step? How do we have those meetups more regularly? How do we bring the Microsofts, the Amazons, whoever the world into those meetups to support these guys? Because there's plenty of investment to help them.
Do you remember a few years ago we had that Three Sisters campaign trying to get the City of Culture? Remember Kilkenny, Waterford and Wexford? There might be an opportunity to do something like that, like whether it's First Tuesday or something like that, but I don't know whether you draw it from the Leos or who controls it or who leads it, but there is opportunities definitely to have some sort of coordinated program there, isn't there?
There's probably something like the local enterprise boards could get their heads together and create an environment like that to make that happen.
A lot of it is happening on the county level, but to have a little
that's the point, they need to get together and have a regional on the southeast.
It always takes someone like within the community to strong, someone to actually, it's so difficult as a startup to give that time, but it's so, it's nearly, you don't see the payback straight away. Like, I know within our organisation, the guy that does it is very involved in the startup scene, is Robbie Scouse, he's one of the co-founders, and he puts a lot of time into it, and it actually has paid dividends for us in the long run. Of course, getting employees and building their profile and stuff, but it's as well as the funding, the support you get from the likes of Microsoft and other companies, Bank of Ireland, it's the time that's involved as well. But there is a community here within Waterford that are doing this.
You have to see it as a long game, I suppose. Once we attract these companies down, do we have the infrastructure and planning in place to support all these new people?
I think it's some of the infrastructure is here, obviously, and there's some advantages to Dublin right now in terms of housing and probably school. Some of the transport infrastructure probably does need a bit of work, but I think that's where there's an opportunity for companies to get creative with regard to their workforce, leverage, remote working a lot more. The technology is there. Most companies are going with hot desking anyway and encouraging working from home because it's more cost effective. So I think companies being open to flexible working will help mitigate some of the challenges with regard to infrastructure, while at the same time, obviously, there needs to be policies for longer term projects to put better transport infrastructure in place.
Yeah, so we were just talking about this beforehand when we met. The broadband in the southeast is great, compared to parts of the west. We're very lucky, but that's the mobility of the new world of work. And it gives people the opportunity to work at home, and it's up to the employers to trust the employees. That they'll make sure that they do what they need to do. We were talking earlier about the sales floor in Microsoft. It's one seat to every 2.8 people, because they expect people to be out of the office. They want them working. They want them to be mobile. And I think when you talk about the infrastructure, maybe companies in the southeast need to look at how they share buildings, how they share work floors. Can they get people to work from home? I think the infrastructure is quite good. I think if there's a demand for new industrial areas, I think you'll get support from the government in relation to schools and housing. So, but I think the mobility, the way of work and the new world of work with mobility is changing. So there's not so much an expectation to be in the office anymore. We'd have a lot of people that would be in regional roles that would work from Gorey, that would work from Cork, work from Mayo, and they may come to the office once every 2 weeks, and they're working from home, to support themselves. So, there's lots of flexibility there.
Yeah, I just think, I'm just thinking with Michael Kenny hat on particularly, like if a big organisation moved in, is there the housing, is there the schools? Probably not. So I think that, locally there needs to be slightly better planning in terms of how we make that happen. I'm not sure we'd be fit for purpose to have a site that we would be able to take in a company that size either. Having said that, from a startup perspective, a small business perspective, very easy for those kind of businesses to set themselves up. There's plenty of office space, plenty of retail space, and housing and schools are okay from small numbers. But if you're bringing in a large business, which, for example, Carlow, from an industrial perspective, is badly lacking. Kilkenny outside of Glanbia probably needs more of that as well. I'm sure St. Lucie said Waterford, then I'm not sure we're set up for that. So that would be my concern.
Yeah, I think a lot of the planning, the urban planning and stuff is based on the census, which is every 5 years, so there will be invariably a bit of a lag there. But again, if it's the startups, you're not talking about a couple of 100,000 people arriving.
No, you're not. But at the same time, based on the census is fine. But if you know, for example, like Dublin's going to grow by 500,000 people between now and 2025. Are they going to come from the country? Are they going to come from abroad? You can start planning for those kind of things now. You don't have to wait for the next census to be told that 100,000 people have moved from the west coast to Dublin to work. Do you know what I mean? So I think you use slightly different data to get ahead of the curve in terms of where the trends are, rather than just the census.
I also think around, like I've been a remote worker for about 20 years. Like I pop in, as I say, to distract everyone every now and again, but I actually am more productive at home. But what tools do people use? Like I personally use Slack. I find it is the connection I have with my colleagues. Anyone else? What tools would you use in order to?
Well, I can't plug our products, but the concept that you just referenced there is called presenteeism. I don't know if you've heard of this before. So they have this in the US where people get fired for actually, stopping at people's desks and having a coffee and interrupting them, because them being in the building disrupts the workforce and lowers productivity. So that's obviously why they asked you to work from home. Look, we use Teams and Office 365, obviously because of the company I work for, but obviously there's plenty of tools out in the market that you can use, and it's great, and you don't have to be in the office anymore. You can do it by video, you can see people, you can talk to them, you can see their reaction. It's like being in the room, so it really helps.
Yeah, just being working for a US multinational company anyway, a lot of our interactions are with our US colleagues, so the remote aspect is baked in anyway. We use Skype and other tools to collaborate. But I think there's a big trust element there. If we attract talent, we have to place the trust in them that they have good intentions and that they will do their job. And obviously, we can have measures in place to ensure that they're doing their job. But I think the first step is to, assume positive intent and trust our people to do their job.
Well, I always say people don't pay me to sit at a desk, it's for the deliverable, and to be very quick if no case studies were forthcoming or white papers or whatever. It's like that's why I'm employed, not to literally put in the hours. Like yesterday I worked remotely for a client, and I was trying to come up with their whole brand, and I was 4 or 5 hours at the desk and I was totally blocked, and then I went off and cooked dinner, and then I came up with the whole brand after dinner. So you can't shoehorn stuff into 9 to 5, especially when you're knowledge workers, and I think that's the difference now. It's a knowledge economy we're running here.
Correct, and I know it's easier from a sales perspective, but obviously putting in place KPIs, and I've never met anyone who's put a KPI on time. It just doesn't exist. So it doesn't matter when you do it, as long as you come up with it. And I think you can measure people's output much easier than you used to be able to do it. And whether you're a startup or you're a multinational, having tools like Skype there, for example, and Office 365 makes it very easy to have that remote thing there as well. And to be honest, if you're hiring people that you don't trust, then you've got to look at your hiring process.
Sometimes the tech companies, because traditionally we were a manufacturing or agricultural economy, and maybe the HR function were used to that kind of clock in, clock out mentality, and I think, and your presence was your merit or whatever, your value, whereas now it's your deliverable or your knowledge, your insight. So I think there might be opportunities for kind of HR to grow in that space as well, and be not so reticent, and this whole idea of trust, and clocking in and all that whole idea. I think it's very old school, and I think HR might be a bit slow to embrace that. Did anyone find that?
For us, it's like trust is a big thing, and when you bring staff that are coming from an organisation where they have to clock in and out, and you tell them, like, you empower them, I've hired you because of your abilities. Like, there's no clocking in and out of hours. It's not school, that's what I say. We're giving you tasks once you achieve them. And it's actually, they become, like that, those staff, they work their network, and you're trying to hire again, they're actually telling people about the culture and what you've created. And we work really hard on it, because like happy staff, like great organisation, if they're happy what they're doing. The pressure of like measuring people, like you have to have KPIs. We have certain ones where we would have the KPIs, and you of course judge your staff by that, but how they achieve it, it's not that important.
I have a little hard question here, which I'm going to throw on you. You know, people tend to be promiscuous in their careers and move on every few years. Is there, if you're relocating down to, say, a big town or a small town or whatever, is there sort of a kind of an unwritten or unspoken rule that you don't recruit from other fellow companies, not competitors, but another tech company in the same space? Is it considered taboo?
To be honest, I don't think so right now. I think that obviously networking is important, and I think if you can convey the value of the place that you've moved to, then it's fair game. And you know, it's sometimes it's to make that jump, say from Dublin back down to the regions. You might need to have a conversation with somebody that's already been there, done that, to kind of maybe satisfy yourself that it's not a downgrade, you know, and that there's value there, and that there's still opportunities for career growth and so on. So I wouldn't. I think maybe in the past it may have been considered taboo, but obviously as long as there's no kind of legal implications to the move with regards to proprietary knowledge or anything like that, then I would consider it fair game.
I don't mean directly poaching. That would be bad form in a small county where we all know each other. But if somebody applied, you always feel that, you know, well, I hang out with the CEO of that company, I might tell him, you know what I mean, or something like that, you know. So it is a consideration if you want to have a kind of career, or is it you just, like we said before, are you moving down to one job or to a whole new career down in the region, you know?
I think it's a challenge because, like, depending on what you do, there isn't necessarily a career unless it's within an organisation large enough to keep you moving. So it is a concern, but I think, you know, if that's the mentality, then there's a lack of professionalism there. I mean, people apply for jobs, you gotta treat them with the privacy and the dignity they deserve. So, as I say, unless it's a legal impediment, I wouldn't see any reason why you wouldn't do it.
And people jump from job to job. It happens like in Dublin, that's the culture. It's go every 2 years to progress. I suppose if we want to create that ecosystem down here, you have to have enough companies that people have that choice. Because like obviously, if I'm thinking of another job, I'm not happy in the role I'm in, so the company isn't providing me with what I need, and that's not healthy. So they're actually better off leaving. So I wouldn't. Say if a friend of mine took an employee for me, I'd be thinking, look, I'm glad because that employee was obviously unhappy.
I think there was a figure, maybe 100,000 people commuting every day.
130.
130. From where is that now?
From all around into Dublin.
Yeah.
So basically from everywhere, but essentially mainly from the Pale, so Meath, Kildare, Wicklow, but then Wexford, Carroll, Kilkenny, Offaly, Laois, the whole way around. So a significant portion, and I know from my own experience, and you've just referenced this as well, Peter, there's many people coming from the West Coast to work in Dublin in the business that I've worked with is substantial enough as well, and they're staying up for 2 or 3 nights a week and then working from home a day or two. So they're huge numbers, and all it points to is 2 things. One, that the talent is available in the regions, it's just tracking them down. And 2, then there's a reason they go, it's primarily money, but if you're spending 4.5 hours a day in the car to get to work, then there's probably a breaking point there in terms of what's going to attract you back down. So I think it's trying to discover what that is. But if there's 130,000 people on the move, you'd have to say the skill set for almost everything has been covered within that.
Yeah, like I remember I interviewed one guy that was using our software, and he said that he wouldn't use our software for a particular technical role because there was only about 3 people in the region that could apply for the job, and so he didn't need to do a large volume screening on that. But like, there surely must be another 100 on the road doing the same job in the hub or wherever they're going, or in Cherrywood or something like that. So the trick is to kind of get them off the road. But I think a lot of the campaigns, the whole anti-commuting, or not anti-commuting but pro-not-commuting, you're kind of preaching to the choir. They're advertising on the buses, on Wexford bus and stuff, or they're advertising locally, there are jobs available. But I think the bigger, I suppose, marketing message has to be out to the companies themselves, isn't it, about the whole smart work
Well,
possibilities?
it's the companies then, and I don't think there's any point in advertising a job, because I think anyone in the room here could get a job somewhere in the region. What's the next one? Where's the career? And that's the part that I think the local agencies as well as the local businesses need to be selling that, because if it was just a job, as I say, anyone here could get a job. But what's the next one? What's the next one? What's the career path like? And it's very, very clear in Dublin, because there's hotspots of almost every industry and every sector. It's a lot less clear cut when you're down the country. So I think when you're hotspotting stuff like production, for example, in the southeast, it's very easy for someone to understand where they could go from here. They can go into food, they go into pharma, they can go into whatever, health tech, etc. There's a virtuous circle there that's well known. In other industries, it's not, and it's how do we get that message out there that it's there for you if you want it.
Like I think we have a challenge countrywide on, like, we call it the war on talent as such. It's the same in Dublin amongst the technology companies. You know, we've 2,000 people based in Dublin, but you've 15 other companies the same. And the concept of people staying for 15, 20 years in role doesn't really exist anymore in traditional IT companies. So they're getting a flavour for all the different companies in the area, you know, and then that builds up their CV. But I think going back to the point we discussed earlier is, you know, the companies need to trust people. It's a new way of work, and, you know, if you can support that from a CEO, you know, CFO, CIO perspective, LT, you know, I think that'll help a lot of companies, you know, to progress.
I definitely say, I know you spoke about HR earlier on, but it's much bigger than that. It's actually the culture of the business, which HR are a part of, but it is the leadership team that essentially is going to drive that culture.
And what incentives specifically could we lure? I know we can, you know, it's a no-brainer getting commuters to get off the road for 4 hours, but how do we lure companies down if companies want a present workforce? How do we lure them down? What incentives can we?
Yeah, well, I think outside of Singapore, Ireland's the second fastest growing technology country in the world. And obviously VC companies or venture capitalists are acknowledging this at the moment. I think in the first quarter last year, there was 350 million invested in Ireland over a 3-month period into startups and independent software vendors. So my point to be is, if you've got a good idea and a good process, or, you know, something that you think that can be developed, I think there's companies out there that will develop it. I was going to reference one company, but I can't because they're probably a competitor of yours, a waste management company from the southwest. But, you know, yeah, exactly, I can't talk about it. No, but, like, I think there's big investment out there for companies with good ideas. So it's not only about luring the talent down, it's growing what you have, you know, and amplifying that.
I think from a scale perspective, you got whatever, I think 26,000 companies down here in the southeast, but 93% of them have less than 10 employees. So 93% of them have less than 10 employees. So this all census data as well. There's only a small amount of companies that actually have any real scale. So there's a big need to kind of develop some of those 93% up into medium-sized companies, and how do we best support them to do that? And then also attracting more medium-sized companies down, because, as I say, we can't just spend. Large guys aren't going to come from Dublin. They might have hubs, they might have companies they want to invest in, but they're not going to come themselves. So we need to find a way of making that grow.
I think the LEOs have changed their remit over the last 5 years as well, and they're kind of, the criteria for assessing feasibility is more along the lines of EI, of internationalisation and having revenue of $1 million within a year and stuff like that. I think there is that missing middle piece that get from 10 to 30 employees rather than 100. There is a, you know, what was wrong with that?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the answer is, but, like, you're going from a very small business to something that's quite large. So that there's a gap there in the middle that needs to be filled.